Hi everyone, it's Lisa from I Dream in Soap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for dropping by. For today's soap I wanted to do a spiral design. Now I'm sure you've seen lots of lovely round soaps where they have a lovely swirl going all around the edge of the soap. But for my design I wanted the pattern to go all around the edge and then spiral towards the centre as well. So to create my design, I've actually sort of compressed a couple of techniques together. So I've ended up with a rimmed soap cross soap curl type technique. And then to fill the design and get my pattern going through my spiral, I've used a pour very similar to what you do if you were doing a to comb or not to comb technique. So let's go and see how we do that. Come on. Let's go and make some soap. I'm going to start off just making a solid block of soap, so I'm using Clementine Pop from You Make It Up. Now I'm making this soap in two stages because basically it's going to have very similar elements to a rimmed soap, and so therefore I need to make what's going to be my sort of really large soap curl, I guess, just like I made the rim before in my rim soap video. And then once I've done that, I'm going to fill it in with some colours. So here I'm just mixing up my normal soap batter with that Clementine Pop in it. I'm actually making more than I need for my spirals today because I don't actually have any of this colour of soap as soap dough. So I'm deliberately making more than I need so I can use the rest for soap dough in later projects. Now for my fragrance oil, I'm using Magnolia and Orange Blossom from Nature's Garden. Now whenever you get a new fragrance oil, it's really important to check the safe usage rate. So therefore you need to get hold of the IFRA documentation, and that's typically just something you can download from the supplier website. Now for cold processed soap, we're looking at category 9A for our soaps. And you can see here that the maximum safe usage rate is 2%. So I'm going to weigh out 2% compared to my total oil weight to make sure I don't exceed that usage rate. Be careful when you're coming up against IFRA usage rates, because if you use the total weight of your soap batter, by the time that water has cured out, you're likely to be over those limits. Now because I'm just making a solid bar of a single colour, I'm just going to blend this until I've got a fairly decent trace, and then I'll pour it into my mould and I'm going to gel it. Now gelling will be quite important here because I do actually want this soap to be able to curl round. So therefore if you make sure your soap goes through gel, it does have a more sort of flexible quality to it. So because I do a water discount, I am going to C-pop my soap. Remember, if you use full water, you probably don't need the oven to force gel. So I'm just going to pop it in an oven that's preheated to 75 degrees centigrade, 170 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to leave it there overnight and then I'll unmold the next day. Now to make my rim, I'm going to use exactly the same process as I did in my rimmed soap video, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. So all I'm doing is I've unmolded my soap and then I'm popping it back into the same soap mould, but I'm just sort of jacking it up at the bottom by using some bits of cardboard. I'll then use this is actually sort of like a coping saw that I've swapped the blade out and put a guitar string in. And I'll use that to just scrape across the top of the mould, and that will give me my thin slices that I want, and I'll just repeat that for the number of curls that I want for my soaps. as I slice off each of the thin layers, I'm just going to wrap them up. I always tend to reuse my cling film, so this is just an old bit of cling film I've used previously, so just wrap them up just to stop them drying out. Once I've got all the strips that I need, I'm then going to sort of pre-curl them, ready to go into the little tubes I'm using to make the soaps. Now if you're doing this, you do need to make sure that you're doing it gradually so that you don't crack the soap that you're trying to curl. So I'm just starting off here with a small bottle, and I'm just going to pre-curl round that first of all, and then I'm just going to use the warmth of my hands to just make sure that the soap sort of bends nicely into that shape. And then when I'm confident that I've got it starting to be reasonably flexible, I'm then going to go in with something smaller. And you can see here I've just got some sort of pastry brush that I'm using here to create that smaller spiral. And then once again just using the warmth of my hand to establish that curl, and then when I'm happy that the soap's sort of in that shape, I'm going to release it and let the curl sort of expand out a little bit, and then just tweak it around to get the shape that I want. Now I want to be able to pour around the spirals of these curls, so I want them to stay still and I don't want the soap batter to leak underneath them. So I'm just going to pour a very thin layer of melt and pour right at the bottom of my little pipes. So here, as you can see, I'm just chopping up some melt and pour. I'm just going to put it into the microwave for sort of 10-15 second bursts. Now it doesn't really matter what sort of melt and pour that you use here, because I'm actually just using this as a little barrier at the bottom, and I'm going to chop it off of the finished soap. So I'm just going to pour a really tiny thin layer of melt and pour into the bottom of these pipes, because remember, we're just going to kind of waste that, we're just going to chop it off, we just want it to hold everything still for now. And then I'm just going to pop my curl in. Now I want the curl to, as much as possible, be pressing against the outside of that pipe, because I don't want any excess soap batter around the outside. I want to see that orangey colour rim. And then I'm just going to muck around with it until I'm happy with the path that that curl takes through the middle of the pipe. And then once I'm done and I'm happy that the melt and pour set up a little bit, I can then complete that for the rest of them. So now it's time to make the soap to pour between those curls. So I'm going to be using Ooh La La, Clementine Pop and Chartreuse Sparkle, and all of these are from You Make It Up. Now I've deliberately chosen to use the Clementine Pop again because I didn't want my spiral to stand out too much as a different colour. Certainly if you did this, you might choose that you want the spiral to actually stand out and be more prominent. And then finally I'm going to be using some titanium dioxide to give me some white. So I've worked out the amount of soap batter I need because I know the volume of each of those little pipes. I've just weighed the curls that are going to go into them and taken the oil weight of those curls away to get the amount that I need. I have included a little bit extra to allow for the amount that might get sort of stuck in the jugs and that and not get scraped out. Now I do need this batter to remain fluid, so I'm only going to bring it up to an emulsion before mixing my colours in. Now I am taking a little bit of a risk here because I do find that this fragrance oil, it doesn't accelerate badly. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be using it, but it's definitely not one of those ones that sort of slows down your trace. So we'll see how we go when we actually pour these soaps. Now I want an even amount of each of these colours, so I'm just going to divide the batter into 4, Add my titanium dioxide to my fourth portion and then just mix these colours in nicely. As normal, I have pre-dispersed my colours in some oil, and this always I find to be really useful, especially when you want to maintain a light trace, because if you've pre-dispersed them, it means you can just hand stir them into your batter rather than having to use your stick blender again. And then when I'm happy with the colours, I'm just going to add my fragrance oil to each of the little pots. And then just finally, I'm just going to transfer that white into a small pot. There's no reason it's in a smaller pot than the others. That's just the only other sort of small pot that I had, which is why it started out in the big jug, because it wouldn't all fit in there. And now for the pour, I'm just going to alternate each of the colours a little bit at a time, very similar to the technique you would use in a to comb or not to comb technique. And what I'm hoping is obviously those colours will move around throughout the spiral and give me a nice pinwheel effect throughout the soap. I then repeated the process for the other two pipes. By the time I got to the third one, my batter had thickened up a little bit more than was ideal, so therefore I just had to really keep banging it down to make everything sort of shoot along through the spiral. But it still came out sort of okay, but yes, as you can see, a nice thin trace batter would be much better for this. So here they are after I completed the pour, and as you can see I've got those two really good ones, and then that third one not quite so good. That's where my batter was a little bit thicker and I had to keep really banging it down. So I unmoulded them the next day, and how I unmould is I've got these sort of little foamy pad things that I've cut out to fit inside my tubes, and I use that just to protect the soap. And then I get something slightly smaller like a tin or a bottle or something, and I use that to push the soap out of the mould, and I find that that works really well, and I very rarely ever even line my moulds when I'm using these pipes, and that seems to be fine for my recipe. Now I poured these soaps so I would get 2 bars out of each of the moulds, so I've chopped them in half, and then do you remember that little bit of melt and pour? I sliced that off of the bottom as well, and now what I'm doing is just planing those sticky out bits of rim that were left at the end of the pour. I repeated that for the rest of the bars, and then if we just have a look at that one that thickened up a little bit, still pretty cool, not quite as nice I think as the ones that were a bit of a thinner trace. And then here they all are cut and planed. I just then finished the edges off by very gently beveling them. And then here are some pictures of the finished soap. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to watch the other rimmed soap video I've made, I've put a link to that on the screen right now. If you'd like to see what I'm doing in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? And if you've got any questions or comments, then please leave them in the comments section below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping.